All right, let's go over this trade we did yesterday on Bitcoin, and it's going to be a little bit more involved because it actually includes a lot of different techniques and strategies that I used. But let's dive in here in the 30-minute first. We were coming into this supply or this order block with imbalance over here, and we've already tapped into it. So we were looking at this model 2 distribution here, and I wanted to see if this was going to hold or turn into a higher time frame distribution model, and that it actually did. So the first thing I do when we come into a supply like this and we start to create a range, I pull out my range tool to track where we are going. At first you started this here and then you slowly expanded this range, and we are going to go ahead, mark out the tap 1 and tap 2. So at this point in this range, I was looking to come back into the supply and potentially create a tap 3 for a Wyckoff Model 1 distribution. I didn't know at the time if that was actually going to occur. However, we had a few telltale signs that I won't get into here, and why I was looking for it and why I had a lot of confidence and confluence that this was going to happen. Those details and nuances will be in a upcoming course that I'm going to have coming out. So, as we pay attention to this area here, this was the pre-market and slowly getting into that 9:30 a.m. New York time. So this candle was your opening candle on the New York session. As we can see, this left a very nice selling tail. So I knew at that point in this creation that we were going to SFP this high, but not only SFP this high, but we also SFP'd these poor highs that we created earlier in that morning. Um, so we had two SFPs of the high into a high probability supply zone, as well as SFPing the previous week high, which of course is this high here. But we also couldn't really hold above the previous day high, which was this high here. And so we SFP this high once, had a failed auction here that actually held above it slightly, but couldn't hold above it. And then, of course, we had that bounce of the VWAP. I was actually looking at this long trade, but wasn't ready to execute as is. It was still early in the morning for me, and I was updating charts. So I did miss this VWAP long up into the supply or the previous week high for the SFP, but that's okay because we got the better trade of the two. Now, once we came up here, I'm going to show you a few different things that I was looking at. Let's come down here on the 15-minute, and you can see again, we still had a 15-minute SFP. Now, we didn't quite SFP these highs, but it was damn close. I would call it an SFP anyways. And if you come down on a 10-minute, you can see that we did have a candle close above this area. However, if you pay attention here, that is a poor high. So I was a little bit sketched out that it might potentially come back and fix this high. Now, what also went through my mind at this time was we had a clear intention back down to the downside. At this point in time, I came down on the 5-minute time frame and was paying attention very closely to see if I could have a more of a sniper entry. I also came over here to order flow, and as you can see, coming into this high, let's actually go show you on the 15. You created a massive bearish divergence. On the 5, 15, 30, you created the bearish divergence not only on CVD, but open interest as well. So we could see that there was exhaustion coming into the supply zone. Even back here, we had exhaustion. So we knew the context of this supply zone was that if we came back up into the supply zone, we were expecting another turn to the downside, not only from the exhaustion aspect, but from the Model 1 Wyckoff distribution. So if we zoom in, as you come into your supply zone, you want to come down on a lower time frame and zoom in real close to see what's going on with CBD at that local points in time. It's very imperative to understand what's going on in this moment right as we are entering and exiting that supply zone. So we can see here that we have a hidden bullish divergence. Hidden bearish divergence. So we have this bearish divergence as we see price coming down, but yet CBD and open interest is coming up. That is showing us that there is a larger player in the market absorbing massive amounts of orders. So people are longing into this zone, but they are longing into a market maker's limit order. So that can clearly be seen here in the order flow, and it can clearly be seen from the candles itself, showing you the massive intention back down to the downside. So at this point, I was pretty confident in this trade. However, I saw it come down to VWAP, and I was telling myself, okay, we need to lose VWAP to make sure that this is going to be the moment in time I want to get in, or else we might just sit here and range and do a whole host of other scenarios. So what ended up happening is we ended up bouncing from the VWAP and showing a slight bit of strength, And again, once we came up here, you saw this bearish divergence showing you that you had absorption from that bounce off the VWAP. So people were longing the VWAP to try to take it even higher than this high to continue going higher. But even these orders were getting absorbed right here. And you can see it. The candle pushed up, but could not close any higher. So it got pushed back down and left us a wick. So at this point, during this candle's creation right here, I knew I wanted to find an entry. And I wanted to see us go below VWAP. So at the time, I was like, okay, if we go below VWAP, I'm going to take an entry. However, if I were to do that, it was going to be on a candle that hadn't closed yet, because I didn't want to get in here and then have my stop loss way up here, because that would have only got me to my target, which was these lows here. It would have only netted a 1.37R trade. And let's just say that we actually just entered a little higher up once we saw this bearish candle come down through VWAP and took a chance very aggressively, which I don't like to do. That would have been a 2.22R multiple trade, which is okay. But I don't like the fact that I had to have almost $1,000 stop loss. That is not the kind of trading I do. So this idea was out. I wasn't going to pull the trigger here. And I was like, okay, how the hell am I going to get in this trade? Please give me another chance to get in this trade. Will we have another opportunity? So once this bearish candle, we had one break of structure here. We'll go ahead and map this out. And this is on the 5-minute time frame. So you had your first break here. And then we had another fractal or internal break here. So now that we had two breaks of structure, and you can even say it also broke this structure and this structure down here with this big candle. So I was like, okay, we have a double boss. That is big news to me. That's exactly what I want to see. So where can I get in on the retest without having a crazy stop loss? So we made these lows and I saw us starting to retrace back up to this supply zone right here. And let's go ahead and put that supply zone on the chart. And this is range supply. And you see we tapped right into that supply zone. However, we had the VWAP right above us, right here in this gray line. And I was like, okay, we're probably going to come back into the supply and probably hit the VWAP for a nice VWAP rejection. And I was like, okay, that's good. I'll take a short off the VWAP. However, that did not happen. We did hit the supply, but we did not make it back up to the VWAP. So I was like, well, damn, I missed my chance. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll get another chance to get in this trade. Usually it does, especially if you have a good amount of movement to go for your target. You can usually find some kind of structure that will give you another chance. And that's just, I want to drive 1 point home, especially for beginners that get really into this game, into the game of trading, that there is a misconception that you have to get in at the very top or very bottoms of the move and you have to capture the whole move to be successful. No, not at all. In all actuality, the majority of the best R to R trades are usually found in the middle of the moves. And what I'm about to show you next is going to show you what I mean and how you can get in even if you're late in the game. So at this point, I was getting a little discouraged and I was like, okay, well, I've got to find some way to get into this trade. And here we go again. We did make another break of structure. And I was like, oh, great, perfect. This is now going to be the best chance for me to get in. And so, what do I do when I always have a new low put in and we make a retracement? Well, I count my ABCs. We have point A, point B, and point C. Great. So this gives me a range. So now I have a range and I love to play ranges. It makes everything so much easier. Makes everything easier to the eye, as well as getting into a trade from a technical standpoint. So we had this range and we broke down, and then we had another range, just like the one up here. Because we missed this one at supply because it did not get to VWAP. So I was like, okay, we had this additional break here. I was like, perfect. Now let's go down to the 2 minute time frame. I like to use the 2, 3, 5 minute. So we're on the 2 minute time frame. And I saw this situation here. And I was like, great, this is perfect. So once I saw this SFP here, this was technically the range at first, and then I saw at SFP the range. And I knew from this right here, this is a redistribution pattern. So I knew that we had much more strength to go to the downside and follow in all of these shorts coming into the market. And again, you could see that on order flow, but that's going to be a little bit more nuanced for this video. So now I had this SFP of the range. Not only that, but we also had this come into our golden pocket. So I knew at that point, I was like, okay, now we hit the golden pocket. We SFP this high, as well as getting rejected from this daily level right here. You can see this capital D over here is a daily level. So I marketed in as soon as this gray candle closed right here. As soon as this closed below and this gray candle opened right here, I opened a short. And then I put my stop loss right above the high and right above the daily. And then from there, it just kept bleeding out and bleeding out. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start setting some of my take profits. I knew this low was going to be liquidity. We also had the previous day open there. We had the previous day low right here. And as we play this out, I actually had some TPs around these poor lows as well. So we'll play that out in replay mode. And we hit our target. And as soon as we hit this target, I started moving my stop loss down and down and down and down. And I believe it was right around this, yeah, it was right at the weekly open where I left my stop loss and went to sleep. And I got hit from the stop loss, and I got 2 take profits hit here as well. Now we can stop that. So it was roughly around a 14 to 15 hour trade on that trade. And that's just a great example to show you how we can refine trades using multiple time frames, multiple strategies, but you have to be very glued to the screen and very focused when this happens. Because if you miss this here, and this was a nice indication of a downfall here, of a short. And then we had this nice breakdown, and you came back to the 0.5 of this range here, this A, B, C. But it was very fast moving, so you had to be ready at that time. But that is it for that trade. And I know it's a little bit more in depth than some of the other setups. But like I said, I'm going to be going over a lot of this in even more depth and more nuance, as well as other many, many great strategies in my soon to come course.